Here at the 2009 Amelia Island Concours d'Elegance, the honoree this year was Mr. David Hobbs.
Hi.
And I've heard so many good reports about what a great time everyone has had with you being the honoree and your speaking last night. And how is it to have this honor?
Well, I've been coming here for now 4 or 5 years, and I was incredibly honoured to be asked to be the honoree because obviously the honorees before me are awesome. Like last year was Parnelli Jones and Johnny Rutherford, Bobby Unser, Brian Redmond, Derek Bell. I mean, Sterling Moss was the first honoree 14 years ago. So the list of drivers he's had have been absolutely quite extraordinary, and to be in that group to me was absolutely awesome.
Well, I've enjoyed so many of the years while we've done the filming because you've moderated so many of the forums.
Well, obviously that's my second job. You know, I raced for 30 years, and I've actually been in TV now for 33 years. So I've done more TV than I ever did racing, and I still enjoy the TV a lot. And of course, we do all the Formula One stuff on speed, which keeps my hand in things like the Daytona 24-hour and the Le Mans 24-hour and things like that. So yeah, I've done quite a bit of voiceover in my time.
Now, the event is wonderful, of course, and it just finished with the best of shows and so forth. But let's just talk just a few minutes, if you would, this marvelous collection of cars that you have an association with here.
Well, obviously we have to start with all the BMWs over there.
Oh, yeah.
I drove the CSL in 1975 and 76, and then in 77 I started driving the 320, and we drove that for 77, 78, and that was a turbo engine. It gave about 670 horsepower, of a little car. Beautiful ZF transmission. It was a great car to drive, just like a real race car. You could drift it. Had great big rear wheels, the little front wheels, and it was really good fun to drive. But unfortunately, it wasn't just quite up to the twin turbo, 6-cylinder, 3.5 litre 935. But we beat them enough times, you know. And then we drove the M1, and then of course back in 1986 we had the new prototype come along. By now, of course, that same 4-cylinder engine, with a lot of development work on turbocharging when Nelson Piquet won the World Championship in 1984. By now that BMW engine was getting 1,000 horsepower for qualifying, which had a 2.2 litres, pretty handy really. And then of course I did the M10B, the number 10 car there, which was very good fun, won the Formula 5000 Championship in that for Carl Hogan. And previous to that, when I first came over here in 1969, I drove the TS5 in 1969, and I lost the championship by 1 point, in spite of the fact that we only did half the races. So
Is that right?
So I did half the race. I didn't start until July, and I lost the championship by 1 point.
Oh.
I won the last race and lost the championship by 1 point. Then the following year, Mr. Surtees was again late sending me over with the TS5A, and we came third that year. And then the following year, Roger Penske asked me to drive this car.
Oh, yes.
At Daytona, Sebring, Le Mans, and Watkins Glen. He also asked me to drive in the Indy 500, Pocono 500, and the Ontario 500 for him. But it would mean switching tyres from Firestone to Goodyear. And so he did a deal with Carl Hogan, and I drove the Carl Hogan car in 1971. And the championship had been reduced then from like 14 to 8 races. And I won 5 of them and only dropped out of 1, so I won the championship pretty handily in the M10. And unfortunately, the Ferrari was a terrible disappointment when we turned up at Daytona. I mean, it was the absolute car of the race. I mean, everybody's jaw just hit the deck. The Gulf 917 people just couldn't believe it when he had the quick fuel filler, you know, the aircraft filler. And they were just absolutely aghast. And of course, we duly set the pole and led the race handsomely. And then in the middle of the night, Mark Donoghue got involved in a fracas on the banking. And we taped it all up and still finished third. Then we went to Sebring, and he and Pedro Rodriguez got in some sort of crashing match together. So we didn't finish that one. We went to Le Mans, and the Ferrari people insisted that we change the engine the night before the race. And the new engine broke, and the old engine was put in another Ferrari, and it finished the race.
Is that right?
So that was very bad news. And then we went to Watkins Glen, and again Mark was on the pole, and we were leading the race handily, and a steering post broke. So this car was had absolutely the best potential, but
the class of the field.
The absolute class of the field everywhere we went, and we never finished the race. Yeah. This car is the one that I won at Monza in 1968 with Paul Hawkins. And I think I came second at Watkins Glen in that car.
The Can-Am car, the Lola here, I think we didn't.
Well, the Can-Am car I've steered clear of, haven't I? Yes. Well, that was the Lola T310. It was a brainchild of Eric Broadley of Lola, who had had the year before for Jackie Stewart. He had a very short, stubby car, and decided that for 1972 he was going to have a very long, flat, what he thought would be an aerodynamic car. Unfortunately, the concept didn't work very well, A, and B, it was horribly late. And so the first time I drove it was on qualifying for the second race of the year at Road Atlanta. They'd already had one race by the time I drove it. And we never ever caught up. We just were always playing catch up. And Eric would come to races and have a handbag like your bag there that'd be full of suspension parts. And we'd have new A-arms and different pickup points and different uprights. And the steering rack went up and down and in and out. And
trying to develop during the season.
But it just never ever.
So you drove so many disciplines. Did you really have a favorite? Is there some that you really liked, or of all the different variety of race cars that you drove?
Well, I mean, I like big open wheelers. You know, the Formula 5000 were good fun. I think there's nothing like an open wheeler to make a driver in a car feel like one. You know, because the wheels are right there, and you feel really part of the car. Even in a very sophisticated car like the 512, it's a two-seater. And you just always feel as if you're slightly off kilter, you know, and there's a lot of car around you. Where in a Formula car, you are it, you know, that you are part of the car. So, and obviously a good, powerful one. There's nothing like that. The Formula 1 cars were a bit more tricky to drive than the Formula 5000. Didn't have the torque, but they were still obviously very good fun to drive. And so, I'd have to say probably a big open wheel car would be my favourite.
Well, I appreciate so much you taking the time. I know everybody wants your time the whole weekend, and it's just a privilege to have you spend a few minutes with us and talk in front of these beautiful, beautiful cars.
Well, thank you very much indeed, and I hope you all come back in 2010.
We certainly will. Thank you.